My name's Matthew Parker, and for 5 long years I believed I'd built the perfect life with my wife, Lisa. I used to wake up each morning thinking I was living the American dream. Hard work, big hopes, and a future that promised both stability and the family we'd always talked about. I was doing well at my IT firm, and when I signed a major service contract with a huge California company, it felt like everything was finally falling into place. That contract wasn't just about a bigger paycheck. It was my ticket to finally starting the family I'd dreamed of with Lisa. Things began to unravel after a camping trip with my boss, Brad Carter. A trip that at first had seemed like a welcome escape into nature's calm. I remember the cool, crisp air, the endless stretch of starry skies, and the way the peaceful silence of the wilderness made even the heaviest thoughts seem manageable. But when we got back, something in Lisa had changed. Her eyes, once so warm and inviting, now looked distant. The sparkle in her laugh had dimmed, replaced by a distracted tension that I couldn't quite place. At first, I brushed it off as stress from her new responsibilities, but the signs kept adding up. One ordinary evening, while folding laundry, I picked up one of Lisa's delicate pairs of panties and noticed an odd, hardened stain that carried a distinctive, unsettling smell. In that frozen moment, time seemed to stop. A cold dread washed over me as I realized that something was terribly wrong. My gut told me that Lisa had been cheating. Every small change I'd noticed, the way she snapped at me over trivial matters, her constant preoccupation with her phone, and the hurried goodbyes in the morning, suddenly came together like pieces of a cruel puzzle. Desperate for answers, I found myself sitting in the modest yet professional office of Shannon Brooks, a sharp family law attorney recommended by a friend who'd been through a similar nightmare. I remember how her calm, measured tone contrasted with the storm raging inside me as I recounted my suspicions. She explained that if Lisa had indeed cheated, I'd need hard evidence, photos, videos, or audio recordings that could hold up in court. With my heart pounding and my hands shaking, I reluctantly agreed to her plan. Shannon arranged for a private investigator named Adrian Fox, a man who seemed to have seen it all before. Adrian explained the steps. Install a tracking app on Lisa's phone, record her calls on our landline, and even hide a tiny audio device in her purse. Each invasive measure felt like a fresh stab, but I couldn't let the uncertainty continue to gnaw at me. While I was away on a 3-day business trip, a trip that I now realize was filled with a heavy sense of foreboding, Lisa called to say she was working as a waitress at a party Brad was hosting at his own house. She claimed she was filling in for a sick coworker, but the rushed tone in her voice sent a shiver down my spine. As hours passed and my calls went unanswered, the knot in my stomach tightened. Later that day, an email from Adrian arrived. I remember hesitating before opening it, my hands trembling as I clicked the attachment. The email contained graphic photographs that shattered any remnants of hope I had clung to. There, in painfully clear detail, was Lisa with 3 different men, one of them being Brad himself, another his son Evan Carter, and the rest a couple of colleagues whose faces I had once trusted. My heart sank, and I felt as if the ground beneath me had vanished. I sat in a dingy hotel bar, nursing a glass of cheap whiskey, my vision blurred by tears as I tried to come to grips with the betrayal. Returning home early, I was a mess of anger, sorrow, and utter disbelief. I immediately checked the tracking app on Lisa's phone. It still pointed to Brad's address, confirming my worst fears. I called her over and over, desperate for an explanation, but all I received were empty silences and half-hearted lies about being busy with class prep. The lies were as clear as day. Overwhelmed by a mix of rage and heartbreak, I reached out to Shannon again. She confirmed that the evidence was more than enough to file for divorce on the grounds of cheating, and even suggested that we might have a case for alienation of affection against Brad, a notion that, while bitter, felt like a small measure of justice for the ruin he'd helped wreak on my life. That day marked a turning point. At work, I made the painful decision to hand Brad not only the signed California contract, but also my resignation letter, effective immediately. I still remember the look on his face, a mix of smug amusement and indifference, as he casually remarked that maybe I should just go with the flow and let Lisa sow her wild oats. His nonchalant cruelty was the final straw. I walked out of his office with a heavy heart, determined to reclaim my dignity and rebuild my life away from his toxic influence. At home, the confrontation with Lisa was as inevitable as it was excruciating. I sat alone at our dining table, the silence around me heavy with memories of a once happy past. I had discreetly placed my .45 caliber semi-automatic pistol on the table, not as a weapon of harm, but as a grim safeguard, a reminder that I wasn't entirely defenseless if things were to spiral further. With a trembling hand, I played back the incriminating audio recordings that Adrian had captured. Each word of Lisa's half-hearted apologies and feeble excuses confirmed the unbearable truth. My wife, the woman I had trusted with my heart, had been cheating on me repeatedly. It wasn't long before a deputy sheriff arrived at our doorstep to serve her with divorce papers. I watched, numb and detached, as Lisa's face crumpled and tears streamed down her cheeks while she reluctantly signed away the years we had shared. The moment was surreal, like watching the slow collapse of a world I had believed in. I also secured a restraining order that demanded Lisa stay at least 150 feet away from both my home and my workplace. Every step felt like a final farewell to a life that I could never reclaim. The days that followed were a blur. Brad began leaving threatening messages on my voicemail, each one more contemptuous than the last. I dutifully forwarded every single message to Shannon, and even contacted the local sheriff, determined to protect what little dignity I had left. Meanwhile, Lisa's parents, Dennis and Barbara, came over to collect her belongings. I can still picture the shock in their eyes as I showed them the damning photographs and recordings, a silent acknowledgement that their daughter had plunged so deep into deceit. Their quiet apologies and sorrowful looks spoke volumes about the irreparable damage that had been done. Amidst the chaos of shattered trust and endless phone calls with lawyers and investigators, a surprising opportunity emerged. Daniel Hayes, the CEO of a promising company called Empire, reached out to me with an offer that seemed like a lifeline. With my world in ruins and my spirit nearly broken, I accepted his invitation for a fresh start, a chance to work in an environment that respected integrity and offered hope for the future. At Empire, I began attending weekly counseling sessions with Rose Carlson, Daniel's kind-hearted and perceptive wife, who also happened to be a skilled therapist. Rose's gentle guidance helped me navigate the turbulent seas of grief, anger, and regret. Slowly, I began to rediscover the man I once was through rigorous gym sessions, martial arts classes that taught me discipline and control, and a strict diet and exercise regimen she recommended. Each day, little by little, I started to feel the weight on my chest lighten ever so slightly. The legal battle with Brad was long, grueling, and emotionally draining. I found myself sitting in a cold, sterile courtroom, facing a judge whose words cut deeper than any physical blow. The judge condemned Brad for his abusive actions and deliberate manipulation that had torn apart my marriage. I remember feeling a mix of vindication and sorrow as he ruled in my favor, awarding me $1 million in damages. It was a bittersweet victory. Financial compensation could never mend the deep emotional scars, but it did serve as a public acknowledgement of the wrongs committed against me. News of the judgment spread quickly, and soon enough, many of Brad's clients and business partners began distancing themselves from a man whose reputation had been so irreparably tarnished. The collapse of Brad's world felt like a final twist of fate, a retribution that, however small, balanced the scales of justice. Even with the legal victory, my personal life remained in tatters. I wasn't ready to open up to anyone new. The kind gestures of several friendly women at Empire went unnoticed as I struggled to rebuild my shattered trust. Then came another blow that I had never seen coming. A tearful phone call from Barbara, Lisa's mother. She informed me that Lisa had tested positive for HIV. I remember the moment vividly, my hand shaking as I gripped the steering wheel during a long, silent drive to her modest home. The ride was filled with a heavy mix of dread and resignation as I braced myself for yet another chapter of pain. At Barbara and Dennis's house, the atmosphere was somber and dimly lit. I found Lisa sitting alone in a quiet corner of the living room, her once vibrant presence reduced to a shadow of regret and despair. Her frail frame and hollow eyes spoke of the toll her choices had taken on her, both physically and emotionally. With a soft, broken voice, she confessed that her reckless decisions, the endless nights of cheating, and the constant pursuit of cheap thrills had led her down this devastating path. In that moment, as she apologized repeatedly and tearfully admitted her mistakes, I felt a strange mix of anger, pity, and sorrow. Despite everything, a part of me managed to forgive her, not for her sake, but to free myself from the relentless grip of hatred that threatened to consume me. As if fate wasn't done with me yet, the news delivered one final crushing blow. One quiet afternoon, while I was trying to settle back into my new routine at Empire, a breaking news report flashed across the television. Brad Carter, his son Evan, and an unidentified woman had been found dead in what authorities described as a double murder-suicide. The details were horrifying. It seemed that upon learning of Lisa's HIV status, Brad had snapped, lashing out in a fit of uncontrollable rage. He shot Lisa, then his own son, and finally took his own life. The sheer senselessness of the violence left me numb. I spent long, sleepless nights replaying every moment, wondering how things had spiraled so disastrously out of control. In the weeks that followed, I attended Lisa's memorial service, a somber, haunting day filled with the murmurs of regret and the quiet despair of those left behind. Standing in the back of the small chapel, I felt an overwhelming mix of sorrow and relief. The service forced me to confront the ruins of a once bright future and to accept that the past was irretrievably gone. I realized then that forgiveness wasn't about excusing her actions. It was about freeing myself from the constant torment of bitterness so I could finally move forward. As I tried to rebuild my life from the fragments of what remained, I found solace in the smallest gestures. One evening, when I was still reeling from the pain of it all, Cynthia Stone, a friendly, warm-hearted colleague from Empire, sent me a casual invitation for happy hour. "Hey, cowboy, join us tonight," she said over the phone, her voice full of genuine concern. For a long moment, I hesitated, still burdened by the weight of recent memories. But then I realized that maybe, just maybe, a little company could help ease the loneliness. That night, amidst laughter and the clinking of glasses at a local bar, I began to feel the faint stirrings of hope that had been buried beneath the rubble of betrayal. Slowly, I started to piece my life back together. I immersed myself in my work at Empire, finding that the challenge of new projects and the support of honest, hard-working colleagues helped distract me from the pain. Weekly sessions with Rose became a lifeline. Her steady voice and empathetic guidance slowly taught me how to let go of the constant anger and how to embrace the possibility of a new beginning. I began to set small, achievable goals, mastering a new programming skill, hitting a new personal record at the gym, and even experimenting with cooking new recipes that reminded me of better times. Months passed, and I started to see changes not only in my work, but also in my outlook on life. I found myself taking long walks in the early mornings, listening to the quiet hum of the city as it slowly came to life. I started journaling my thoughts, sometimes writing pages about the pain and loss, other times scribbling down dreams for a future I dared to imagine. In those moments, I began to understand that healing wasn't linear. It was a messy, unpredictable journey that required both patience and self-compassion. Even as I gradually opened up to the idea of new relationships, I remained cautious. Trust, once so easily given, had been shattered, and I wasn't eager to risk it again. Yet, I couldn't completely close myself off. I found comfort in the small kindnesses of strangers, a friendly nod at the coffee shop, a warm smile from a colleague, or the gentle encouragement from Cynthia when she'd check in on me after a tough day. These moments, though fleeting, reminded me that there was still goodness in the world. The legal proceedings against Brad Carter eventually came to a close. I remember the courtroom vividly, the sterile smell of polished wood, the quiet murmur of the audience, and the weight of every word spoken by the judge. When the verdict was read, awarding me $1 million in damages, I felt a hollow victory. While the money could never replace the love I'd lost or the years of trust that had been shattered, it did symbolize a measure of accountability for the devastation that had been wrought. The public condemnation of Brad's actions sent shockwaves through his network, and soon enough, many of his business associates distanced themselves, unwilling to be linked to a man whose actions had so callously destroyed lives. In the aftermath of the trial, I experienced a period of deep introspection. I spent long nights alone, thinking about the choices that had led me to this point and what the future might hold. I realized that every painful chapter, from the first signs of Lisa's change to the final, horrifying news of Brad's demise, had forced me to confront my own limitations, my own capacity for forgiveness, and ultimately, my own strength. I began to understand that while the scars of cheating might never fully fade, they did not have to define me. I could choose to learn from the pain, to rebuild my identity, and to move forward with a newfound sense of purpose. Now, as I look back on those tumultuous years, I see a man who has been broken, battered, and bruised, but who has also learned the hard way that life goes on. I continue to work at Empire with determination, building a future that is no longer tethered to the ghosts of the past. My weekly sessions with Rose remain a steady anchor, and I occasionally venture out for dinner with Cynthia or a few colleagues, cautious but hopeful that someday I might trust enough to love again. This is my story, a raw, deeply personal journey through heartbreak, loss, and ultimately the quiet promise of a new beginning. Every painful moment, every tear, and every sleepless night has led me to this fragile state of recovery. I still bear the scars of Lisa's cheating and the tumult that followed, but I have learned that sometimes the only way to move forward is to embrace the pain, let it transform you, and slowly rebuild from the ruins. I know now that healing is not about forgetting. It's about finding the courage to live again, one day at a time. Looking ahead, I'm determined to make peace with the past. I've learned that forgiveness doesn't mean condoning what happened. It means freeing yourself from the burden of resentment so you can finally start living. As I drive home on quiet evenings, the hum of the highway and the glow of the setting sun remind me that there is always hope on the horizon. I may never fully erase the memories of those dark days, but I can choose to build a future that honors my resilience and celebrates the small victories along the way. I'm still a work in progress, a man shaped by both love and loss, betrayal and redemption. And while the journey has been long and painful, I now stand on the other side with a clearer understanding of who I am and what I deserve. Every new day is a step toward reclaiming my life, a testament to the fact that even in the face of the deepest heartbreak, there is always a chance for a new beginning. This is my life, my truth, and I'm determined to live it on my own terms with courage, honesty, and hope lighting the way.